This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario.
Hi everyone, it's Rebecca and Tara, and today we are kicking off our annual Christmas Books podcast, but with a special guest, author Jeremy John. Jeremy is currently ranked as the 62nd most famous person from Brantford, Ontario. Look it up. Apparently, there are a lot. His first book of short stories, and the one we will be talking about today, came out in 2021 from Dunbar Press. It is called Robert's Hill, or The Time I Pooped My Snowsuit and Other Christmas Stories. Jeremy will complete the Poop trilogy with his third book coming out in May 2024. All three titles will be listed in the show notes. Jeremy lives with his wife and kids and a dog that he pretends not to like in Sudbury, Ontario. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Okay, but first we have to know, why don't you like the dog? What's with the dog?
I didn't say I didn't like the dog. I say pretend not to like the dog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Bean is a good dog. He is. How do I put this nicely? He is so desperately lonely all the time that it's pathetic, and it makes me sad for him because he can't be in the room with you and not touch you. And if he can't not touch you, he has to be on your lap, and he has to almost sit on your face just to know that you love him. It's exhausting.
Well, we love dogs. So. Yeah.
And I was going to say, and in your defense, my husband also pretends to dislike our dog. It's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be pretty common. Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy, to start off, we would love it if you could describe this collection of holiday-inspired stories for our listeners.
Certainly. It's a collection of short stories all about Christmas. They're not religious stories. They're stories about family and tradition and coming together and the things that I think are most important about the holiday. And where they came from is a sort of I'll admit, an odd place. So ever since I was a little kid, I have read a story to my family as a Christmas gift. Every year we get together at Grandpa's and sit by the tree, and I read them a new story every year. And this is the best of the last 40 some odd years of stories that I've shared with my family. And I'm lucky that the people from Dunbar Press allowed me to put them together in a book and share them with even more people.
Wow. So these are stories you've been sort of telling all along, and you finally just kind of got them down on paper.
Yeah, as luck would have it, a friend of a friend of a friend knows someone, and it told them about my tradition, and they said, could we read a few? And if it's an example of my abilities as a writer, so I did 40 years of writing, and I came up with like 12 stories that were good. So it goes to show you the level of quality of the other stories I had.
Oh, and that's kind of amazing. So did you know from the beginning, well, since this is a collection that you had already had going for so many years, but did you know from the beginning that you wanted to write a trilogy and that they would be sort of holiday or season focused? Because I know the new one coming out is like a summer collection, correct?
Yeah, exactly. No, never my idea to make a trilogy. I've learned one of the best things about being a writer is throwing launch parties. And I said at the first launch party that, we should enjoy ourselves tonight because there's never going to be a second book. And then at the second book, I said, wow, we should really enjoy ourselves because there's no way there's a third. And I'm happy to say I'll be saying that again at the book launch for the third book. So never intended to even release them as a book, let alone have three. I was just lucky enough that maybe the first book struck a chord, and Dunbar Press asked if I had something that could fit in their fall category for the second book. And the third book will be out May of 2024.
And so the Halloween book, which is the second one, so where did those stories kind of come from?
Very organically, I was lucky enough to be invited to lots of schools to talk about being an author and helping students with their writings. And we would do little writing activities, play little word games to try to get ideas going. And strangely enough, or I guess not surprisingly, a lot of the ideas that the teens came up with were zombies and horrific monsters and things like that. And when Dunbar asked if I had something for fall, I said, well, there's this idea. How about a whole bunch of ghost stories, scary stories? We'll follow the idea of Robert's Hill, the first book. So a bunch of short stories, all having to do with Halloween and spookiness. And they said, sure, great. Can you write it? And I put together some ideas, and it turned out to be the second book, which is called The Strange Grave of Mikey Dunbar and Other Stories to Make You Poop Your Pants.
I just like that name, Mikey Dunbar. That's a good name.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll tell you something I don't tell most people about Mikey Dunbar is that his name didn't matter. What mattered to me was the anagram. So there's something very specific if you rearrange the letters of Mikey Dunbar.
Are you going to
Oh.
tell us, or do I have to like figure that out by myself?
I guess I could, just because we're close, I guess we're friends, so I could tell you.
Oh, I don't know though. I want to try to guess it though.
All right. So there's 4 stories in the second book called The Strange Grave of Mikey Dunbar, and each one tells you a different version of why Mikey's grave is so strange, or who or what is buried in Mikey's grave.
Oh.
And there's a hint in there with the anagram.
Okay, so you'll probably get an email from me tomorrow.
Yeah, you will.
I hope so.
While Rebecca's still figuring it out, I'll be like, just tell me.
It is wonderful, and something I'd never anticipated was when someone sees something in your story that you never saw. And I'll give you a quick example of a little girl who noticed I won't call it a plot hole, but an unanswered question. And she put her hand up at a reading one time and asked this specific question. And I said, first off, well done. I'm glad you noticed that. And second off, the entire editing team never mentioned it once.
Wow.
So well done, 7-year-old girl in a library. Because the editor, I knew it was there, but the editors didn't have a problem with it. And I didn't know how to fix it without making more work for myself. So I just left it in.
And which collection was that in? Which book was it in?
That would be one of the stories in the Halloween book, The Strange Grave of Mikey Dunbar and Other Stories to Make You Poop Pants. She's
going to be an impressive editor when she gets older then.
That's exactly what I said. You should be going through stuff and getting paid well for it, because that's really remarkable.
So I couldn't help but wonder when I was reading the stories if there were incidents in your family history that inspired some of the stories, or are they strictly like imaginative?
There are some real people and some real incidents. I'm assuming this is a roundabout way of asking if the time I pooped my snowsuit is a real.
Yeah. Is it you?
Story.
Is it you,
Okay.
Jeremy?
So, as I always tell students, yes, it was true. It was a long time ago. And in the story, I've exaggerated all the instances, but it's pretty much how it happened kind of idea. So there's ones like that happened, real things that happened in my life. But a lot of them are things that were inspired by my life. So there's one that's called Never Open a Present on Christmas Eve, a Cautionary Tale. We had a tradition when I was growing up of opening a present on Christmas Eve, and I had a history of always picking the worst present. So yes, those things like that did happen, but often they're just things I wanted to talk about, or things I wanted to expand on the idea of, sort of like, what is the greatest Christmas movie of all time? I just started ruminating on that and started looking it up. And that ended up being a fun story called The Greatest Christmas Movie of All Time Ever. When I fell in love with the Scrooge story, I wrote Humbug. So there's always a nugget of truth that gets me started, and then I kind of expand on it from there.
So what about the Pigeon King? Because is that the lighted train that goes through Canada? Is that kind of taken from that?
Yeah, so the Pigeon King Saves Christmas. Yeah, that's very much where I got that holiday train idea. But the Pigeon King, it comes from stories that I used to tell my daughters when they were very little. For some reason, and I honestly don't know why, I ended up telling them a series of stories over their childhood about the Pigeon King and his little adventures. And sadly, I don't remember most of them, but when it came time for that year's Christmas story for the whole family, we had not only my little girls in the family, but lots of little kids in the family. So I wrote The Pigeon King Saves Christmas for the little ones in the family. That's one of the reasons that the audience changes throughout the story, right? Some of them are for big kids and some of them are for little kids, because that's what happened in my family. We started off, I wrote them when we were all young, and then we all got older and I wrote older stories, and then we all started having babies and I wrote kid stories again.
Okay, so who is this collection for? Because it's interesting, because I was even thinking like teens, preteens, this would be really good, but I wasn't sure like who's the audience.
So this is why the marketing department doesn't like me. The good people at Dunbar Press, but I've angered the marketing department because I call it a family book. The thing I would want most would be for a family to gather and read one of my stories, leading up to the holidays, get them in the mood kind of idea. So I usually tell parents, hey, read them and then and then let your kids read the ones you want. I tried to make the titles as obvious as possible. So I would say things like Christmas Time in the Neighborhood, The Pigeon King Saves Christmas, Merry Christmas, Mr. Baggins. Those are all great ones for the little kids. Maybe The Christmas Divorce is not one you read to your kids, or The 12 Shots of Christmas. Again,
Yeah.
one the grown-ups might appreciate more.
That's actually a really, really good point, because I mean, I love this idea of sharing it with family, because as the family gets older and changes, their demographics, this story could be something they could share. That could be kind of their, history of reading this every year, or their tradition, I should say. So I really like that.
I would be absolutely delighted if someone started with The Pigeon King Saves Christmas, and as they got older, graduated to something like The Sweet Things or Humbug or something like that.
And I have to laugh about the one about opening gifts on Christmas Eve, because we always did the same thing. We were given the opportunity to open one gift on Christmas Eve, and I am thankful that I did not have the same experience as the kid in the story, because I did not. I think I picked good ones every year, I think.
The story of the child opening the handkerchief, really, that was word for word what happened to me. I thought maybe I'm not a smart kid, but I thought that the thinness of the box made it something special, right? There's something unique about how thin it was. And then I was 6 and opened up a monogrammed handkerchief and thought, what kind of a person sends this for someone for Christmas?
Yeah. Who did send that?
My Aunt Muriel, God bless her soul. We used to send things from England, and I thought it was exotic. I thought that this was someone who came from the whole world away and talked in a strange way and said things like lorry and lift and tin. I thought she was the most exotic person in the whole world, but apparently she didn't. She didn't know much about 5-year-old boys and what they want for Christmas.
Well, and I have to laugh because she was a great aunt as well, I think, in the story. And I think that wasn't that part of what made him want to pick that, because she was a great aunt? I thought that was part of it. But
yes,
I'm a great aunt. So I took that to heart when I read that. I was like, oh my God, please don't ever let me give a kid a gift that they write a story about many years later about me.
Yeah, I was dumbfounded as a child. Why would they give a name of great to someone who would give such lousy presents?
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. There was something else I wanted to ask you. Now I'm forgotten what it was.
We've covered the poop thing, so that's good. That's taken
I know.
care of.
Well, it'll come back to me in a minute here. But I just want to say this, that I want to encourage people to pick up this book. And I want to read the Halloween book now, especially because I really love this one. The stories are, they like, I cried on some of them and I laughed on some of them, and they reminded me of things in my own childhood that were just brought back great memories. In fact, I was sharing one with my mom today, because my brother, the one story I'm going to ask you to read is about a road trip. And I was reminded of a road trip that we did. And this was back in the day when you didn't have seatbelts for kids, right? And car seats. And my little brother was standing behind my dad, and he was singing Gloria, that thing.
Yeah.
But that's all he knew of the song. So every time, he didn't know any other word. He just knew that. And he kept singing over and over. And I said something to my mom, who's 86 years old. And I said, remember when he did that? And she's like, oh my God. And we laughed. And I thought, what a great thing to do, is read this story and have that memory of my little brother doing something that annoyed all of us. But it was Christmas, so what can you say? And
it's funny how those memories linger. It's the things you don't think that you would remember forever that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've tried to explain this to parents, first time parents, that that it doesn't matter if you make the Disney World trip or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be the conversation you had with Dad on the way home from Disney World that you remember 20 years later. So it's not about how much you spend at the cottage or if you remembered the floaties. It's about playing cards and making someone laugh so hard milk came out their nose. It's those moments of being together that really are all that matters.
Yeah, and I think that's what this book does really well.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just really is. It was very emotional, but like I said, it was fun, funny, heartbreaking at parts and everything. I loved it. So what I would like to ask, if you wouldn't mind, is reading an excerpt from, oh my gosh, what was it called again?
Merry Christmas, Mr. Baggins.
Thank you. That's the one, because that was actually my favorite story, because it did.
Oh.
We did a lot of family trips. We were in Michigan and my grandparents were in Alabama. So we
Ooh.
did a lot of road trips down there. And so I just love that story, especially.
I would be delighted to read it. And it's one of those stories that, again, I didn't realize the universality of it. How many people come or talk to me and say that they always had the worst spot in the car. And it seems like every child, no matter where you sat, you felt you had the worst spot in the car.
Yeah, I got the bump.
Yeah.
I got the bump a
I was
lot.
going to say the bump seat is the worst seat in the car. Yeah.
I was on the bump for most of my childhood, and in a wood paneled station wagon. So yeah, if I can, I'll read the last little part of Merry Christmas, Mr. Baggins, and this comes from a father and son who are the last ones awake in the car. Mom and sister have fallen asleep on this long drive to go see Grandma and Grandpa on Christmas, and the father and the son are the last ones awake. And Dad lets him listen to The Hobbit on audio tape. Me and my dad traveled down long stretches of dark, empty highway, while the Hobbit, the Wizard, and the 13 dwarves traveled to the mountain of Erebor. I can't honestly say that I was able to follow the whole story. I was maybe a little young for the book, but I remember lots about listening to The Hobbit. I remember my dad, his deep voice as he whispered about the next part of the story before flipping over the tape, the excitement in his face as he talked about the Battle of the Five Armies, the way he tried to sound like the English narrator when he said names like Gloin and Gandalf. I remember the way he would smile out toward the road when he talked about what had just happened in the story. And I remember the only time that night when he stopped the tape, it was to go back and listen to his favorite part of the story. It was the description of the dragon, my dad keeping one hand on the steering wheel while rewinding the cassette so he could hear Smaug boasting to the little hobbit. My armor's like tenfold shields, my teeth are swords, my claws are spears. The shock of my tail is a thunderbolt, my wings a hurricane, and my breath, death. When the tapes were done, when chapter 19 was finished, when Bilbo had made his way back to Bag End, my dad and I stayed up talking for the rest of the night. Dad basically told me the entire story of Lord of the Rings while occasionally telling me that if Mom saw I was still awake, we were both going to get in trouble. But it never happened. Mom slept through the night and we talked about dwarves and elves and rings until morning. When we stopped for breakfast, everyone in the backseat assumed I had been asleep like them. But I hadn't. I'd been with my dad to Middle-earth. We had gone on an adventure together, defeated a dragon, found the Arkenstone, and made Dane the king under the mountain. Just the two of us. My sisters hadn't been to Beorn's house. My mother hadn't gone to the cave palace of the Elven King. Just we did that. Just me and my dad. We listened to the story the next night, both nights, and on the return journey, several times each trip in the following years. Now, my kids and I have read the books together, but it was never the same as when me and my dad listened to the old cassettes in the family station wagon. The darkness outside always just beyond the reach of the headlights. His hands on the steering wheel looking impossibly large. The quiet hiss of the tape whenever the narrator took a pause. It was magic. A young boy, his father, and the quest to reclaim the kingdom of Erebor. And that's why I'm recording this. I hope you hear it like I did. Just you and your dad. The two of you together to defeat the dragon, avenge a fallen king, and reclaim your kingdom. Merry Christmas, grandson. Chapter 1, An Unexpected Party. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort.
Wow. That was fabulous.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank
it is
you.
One of my favorites to read.
It reads really well as an audio, but also just to read it. I just, like I said, that one was my favorite one of the collection, I think.
Thank you.
One of the things I did remember my question from earlier when I said I'd forgotten. But so when you say you're a writer, you've got these 3 books that you'll have, but what have you been doing? Have you written other things, or are there other things coming in the future outside of the 3rd book next year?
I haven't thought that far ahead. I haven't thought about a 4th book. Essentially, I would write whatever Dundurn would ask me to write, I'd be happy to make more and more and more. I really enjoy what it is I get to do with these books, and I'll be very clear: writing is not my favorite part. Reading the stories to audiences is without question the best part of my day, and I'm lucky enough to do it more and more regularly. So I would happily just read stories all day long, but it sounds like I need to write them as well, which I will begrudgingly do. My proposal for the next one was a collection of bedtime stories, a pirate story and a ghost story and stories about ninjas and knights in shining armor and all those sorts of things. But that I have to finish editing book 3 first.
So Jeremy, because that was a wonderful reading, by the way. You're very good at reading aloud your stories. Is there an audiobook of your story, or is that something you would want to make?
I would be delighted to make an audiobook. There's been a few recordings here and there on the internet, but we've talked a little bit about making something. I would like to make more than just an audiobook. I would love it to be a play, a production. I would love to hire someone with a great English voice to read all the parts of The Hobbit that I use in that story, rather than me. Some cool sound effects and all that stuff. I think it'd be wonderful. We've talked specifically about doing it with the second book. And so we've actually had some conversations with some people about what it could sound like with spooky monster sounds and things like that. But somewhere down the road, I would be delighted to do that.
Jeremy, thank you so much. I think you've kicked off our annual Christmas Books podcast really, really well. I think,
My pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I encourage everybody to get a copy of one or all 3. Well, the third one's not out yet, but when it does come out next year. And just thank you so much. You are a natural storyteller, whether you write it down or whether you tell it. You were just a joy to have you today.
Yeah.
Oh, my delightful. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Before we let you get away, Jeremy, do you have a favorite Christmas book that you like to reread every year or every couple years?
That's really good. I'm you guys talk to a lot of writers, and I'm probably the worst reader that you've ever spoken to, because I tend to, I tend to read the same thing over and over again.
That's
So I read
okay.
I read the Lord of the Rings every couple of years.
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough to read Merry Christmas, Mr. Baggins, or The Pigeon King Saves Christmas, and things like that. Occasionally, I will, if I've got an audience, a very captive audience, I'll read something like The Sweet Things. That one is one of my absolute favorites, because it was such a surprising one as far as what I thought it was going to be and what it turned out to be. And I also think it has just a really beautiful message about the joy of giving, and how love can be multiplied when it's given away. And it's the only thing in the world that comes back to you more once you've given it out. So that's one of my faves. And sometimes I get to read that at Christmas, and I truly enjoy that.
Yeah, and that one had a really a very old classical fairy tale kind of vibe to it. I really liked that one. Yeah, that was really beautiful.
And that was, again, just a question I stumbled across. Who invented the candy cane? And since no one seems to know, because it was a long time ago, I decided to make up the story of the invention of the candy cane. And again, I really was pleased at how different it turned out than what I expected. I think that's the magic of writing, is when part of your brain surprises another part of your brain with what it came up with. That's a truly magical thing. And that was one where I did not expect the ending to be what it was going to be.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Delightful. Appreciate you taking the time.
Well, that was a fun interview.
It was. Jeremy is a wonderful storyteller. Like, his stories really come alive through his voice.
I agree. And I was thinking, yeah, I would love to hear him do all of his books on audio, because that's fantastic. So I agree. But this second half of our show today is going to be our annual Christmas books program or podcast. And you did it last year. It was really popular. And this is really your baby. So, because I don't really do Christmas readings. So I'm going to turn it over to you and tell us what you have either planned for this year for Christmas or what you're recommending to us.
Okay. So I'm bringing 5 Christmas themed books or holiday themed books to the podcast today.
Okay.
I've got them in little groups, and I have a surprise one. The fifth one is kind of a surprise, but not really, as far as like what I will say the theme of it is.
Okay.
But I'm going to start it with probably like the most standard Christmas books, and those are going to be our romances. So I have 2 romances for us today.
Okay.
So the first one is my most anticipated one because I have been looking forward to this one since the author, I don't know what's the word, not posted, although it was posted because I saw it on Instagram, since she spoke of this book at the beginning, I think it was at the beginning of the year kind of thing. And
Ooh.
I know, this is 3 Holidays and a Wedding by Uzma Jalaluddin and Marissa Stapley. So they co-wrote it. So we're familiar with Uzma because I've read all of her books. You've read 1 or 2 of her books,
Mm-hmm.
romances with Muslim characters, and I love her books. Marissa Stapley is another Canadian author. I have not read any of her books yet, but she is on my list.
Okay.
Oh, and I find co-written books interesting. I don't know how they do it.
I don't either.
Yeah.
We should next time we have to think about that. Maybe finding an author who does that and then
Yeah.
tell us, and then they can explain to us how they do it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it would be really interesting to know. But so I haven't read this book yet. Really looking forward to, but here is the setup. So Miriam Aziz and Anna Gibson are seatmates, strangers, on a flight to Toronto over the holidays. Miriam is going for her sister's impromptu wedding, and Anna is going to meet her boyfriend's wealthy family for the first time. Motivated by severe turbulence, the 2 women confess their deepest hopes and fears to each other, thinking they will never see each other again. But there's an emergency landing, and the 2 women soon find themselves snowbound in the picturesque and quirky snowfall inns in small town Ontario. Along with them is Saif, the love of Miriam's life, unbeknownst to him, and Anna's actor crush, who just happens to be filming at the inn. And that's then holiday romance and love ensues. It just sounds delightful.
Mm-hmm.
I love a small town. I love a small town romance. Not that I read a lot of them, but I really enjoy them.
Sounds like a Hallmark movie for sure.
It totally does.
Yeah.
It totally does. But I think with some diversity, with
Oh yeah.
Uzma being involved, I think we'll get a little more diversity than we do in our generic Hallmark ones.
Yeah.
Now, for the second romance, it is The Holiday Match by Tori Samuels. So Tori is also a local Ontario author, and I actually met her this summer at the Eden Mills Writers Festival.
Oh,
So she
okay.
was there selling her books. So I thought the covers are beautiful. That's the wonderful thing about Christmas romance. The covers are really, really pretty. They
Mhm.
take you in. So her books caught my eye. I went over to her table and I grabbed one because I'm like, that's perfect for Christmas. So the little plot synopsis for The Holiday Match. After a bad breakup with his ex, Richard returns to his hometown of Bolton, Ontario for the holidays. He soon runs into Allison, his middle school crush, and realizes that something may be brewing between them. But wait, Richard's ex, who still has feelings for him, has conspired for him to partake in a secret Santa dating service. I don't know if these exist. I don't know if I'm just out of the loop if there are like secret Santa blind dating services, but you just kind of go with it. Anyways,
Yeah.
a secret Santa dating service, and Richard and the mystery girl are hitting it off. Who will steal Richard's heart for the holidays? It just sounds sweet. I
Yeah.
gotta say, it just sounds like a sweet Christmas book. And sometimes this is what I want at Christmas time,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. Okay. So that's enough romance. Let's move on to murder, shall we?
Ooh.
I know. Because I also, before I started, I haven't read a lot of Christmas romances, but I have always enjoyed reading murder books and like horror books at Christmas time. And I don't know why. But I don't think it's an uncommon thing. And I love Christmas, and I'm a huge sentimental fool when it comes to Christmas, but I also like a little darkness to it,
Yeah.
right? Will you read like a murder book at Christmas, or?
I don't know. My reading does not change at all year round. And
Yeah.
again, I don't know if I even said this last year, but when I moved to California when I was in my early 20s, I just never celebrated Christmas after that. So, because I was away from family and, and my friends were with their family. So I was always just hanging out by myself for Christmas. So it doesn't really mean anything to me, really. So I
Yeah.
don't have all those warm, fuzzy feelings about Christmas.
Okay. So maybe a murder book will be good for you.
Yeah.
So I have always read like a murder mystery or something at Christmas time, but it's only the last couple of years that I've made them like more themed Christmas murder books.
Ooh.
So I, of course, this is not a surprise, am bringing an Agatha Christie one. So this is an Hercule Poirot, and it is The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding. I love that title.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great title? Anyways, I think it's short stories and interconnected somehow. I haven't read it yet, but just a little synopsis of it. So that's just going to be part of that's my Christmas reading and my Agatha Christie reading
Yeah,
at the same
exactly.
time. So
Mhm.
combines the two goals. So that'll be a fun one. Now, my fourth one is The Christmas Murder Game by Alexandra Benedict. I borrowed this one from my mom, and it's like it's got built-in puzzles from what I can tell that you kind of try and guess. In addition to like the mystery itself, there are puzzles built into it for the reader.
Oh.
And there is on the inside a map, but it looks like the board game for Clue on it. So each room and stuff like this, and a
Hmm.
cast of characters, which will just be fun. This is the plot. Endgame House is the Armitage's grand family home and the setting for the family's annual Christmas game. But this year's prize? The deed to the house. Lily, who hasn't returned to the house in 21 years since her mother's death, is convinced to return when her aunt promises that not only could she win the keys to the house, but she could also learn the identity of her mother's murder. We've got a blend of estranged cousins, snowed in a grand house, phone lines down. 12 days of Christmas, 12 clues, 12 keys. Who survives?
Ooh. Now, did your mom read it, I assume, and give you like a thumbs up it was good?
I assume she has. The fact that she has passed it on makes me think it's a thumbs up.
Mhm.
So she hasn't said anything to it. She just gave me a stack of books recently and said, I'm finished with these. And generally, if she thinks I'm not going to enjoy a book, she won't pass it on.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know when she read it. I don't know if it was last Christmas or recently. I'm going to have to ask her because I could also see, and my mom probably is listening to this right now. I could see that my mother would read Christmas books whenever she wanted to, like not just at Christmas time.
Yeah, maybe August or something.
Yeah, I could totally see her doing that. So, Mom, please let me know because I have a feeling that, yeah, she read this during the summer or something, and I want to know if she's that crazy. I think she is.
But it does sound really fun. I mean,
Does.
it does sound like the game Clue, and that just sounds really
Mhm.
fun.
It does. It really does. It reminds me of that movie too, which is very Clue-like. Uh, the Knives. What was it called? Did you watch that one? Oh
No.
shoot. The second one in the series was Glass Onion. Oh my God, I think I'm totally making names up here now. I'm going to stop because that name sounds ridiculous. But the first one movie was something about knives. Anyways, it was super fun, but it was like a Clue thing. But let's go. Let's leave that before I,
Yeah, if we figure it out, we'll put it in the
yeah.
show notes
I know
because
someone's
I don't
shouting
know.
at me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, my final book. Now I'm only bringing 5. I could have brought more books because I've been
Mhm.
keeping like a little tally of them. So, but I'm going to keep it at 5. And this one, Rebecca, is a book that I think you might like to read for Christmas. I thought that
Okay.
would be fun to bring something that, like a Rebecca Christmas book.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Rebecca's book, Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Have you heard of Claire Keegan or
No.
read anything? No. I have heard of her, but I haven't read anything by her. And I would say in the last 6 months, her books keep popping up in different places for me. So I have to read something by her. But anyways, this was one that I found recommended as a Christmas book. The setting, 1985, set in a small town in Catholic Ireland. During the weeks leading up to Christmas, Bill Furlong, a coal and timber merchant, faces his busiest season. But his past is also rising up to meet him when he encounters the complicit silences of a people controlled by the church. It's described as an unforgettable story of hope, quiet heroism, and tenderness. That sounds like you,
Totally sounds like
right?
me. Oh my gosh. I'm going to
Yeah,
look that one up for
I know. I'm
sure.
like, I know like the murder books I could see you interested in. I'm like, the romances Rebecca will not be interested in.
No,
But
not
I'm like,
really.
I'm going to find a book that I think Rebecca will be like, I may read that this Christmas.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so sweet of you to do it that way. I think you might have to do that every year now and
Yeah.
find a good book that I would really enjoy, but I'm totally looking this one up. That does sound very, very good. So,
Yeah.
now are you sure since you made a long list that you don't want to add anything else? Are you
Well,
sure?
okay, you know what? These won't have as big a synopsis because I haven't prepared it. But this is one that I think I read several years ago, like decades ago, but I want to revisit. And that is Winter Solstice by Rosamunde Pilcher. Are you familiar with her?
I've heard of her, but
Yes.
I'm sure I haven't read anything. Yeah.
I think she wrote a lot in the 80s, English writer. I think her most popular book was like The Shell Seekers. I
Yeah.
went through a phase when I read her books and I loved them. And The Winter Solstice is like a Christmas book by Rosamunde Pilcher. I think it would be a classic Christmas
Okay.
read. I've also heard great things about The Christmas Bookshop by Jenny Colgan. Again, another author that I have not read. There's All I Want for Christmas by Maggie Knox. This book was published last Christmas, and Maggie Knox is actually a co-written book. I'm going to quickly look it up right now.
Okay.
It's two Canadian authors who again got together and co-wrote this Christmas book.
Hmm.
Oh yes, so it is Karma Brown and Marissa Stapley. Oh, who wrote my first book with Uzma.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that seems like I think I read her first one. Oh yeah, their first one. Here I am referring to them in the singular, but the first one was The Holiday Swap, which I read last Christmas, and their latest one, which was published in 2022, is All I Want for Christmas.
Okay.
So that's I thought would be again if you're just looking for like a fun romance. This one is going to be a little shout out to a friend of the podcast, Sarah. And this is probably suggested by Sarah, and it is Letters from Father Christmas by Tolkien, Lord of the Rings fame.
Yep.
And one that I very recently heard about and put on my list is A Holly Jolly Diwali by Sonia Lawley, which,
Yeah.
we want to make all of our reading more inclusive and diverse. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that sounded like a great one.
Oh, I
Yeah,
like that one. Holly Jolly Jolly. Okay,
I
cool.
know. Yeah,
Well,
I
good.
think I think that's good. I think that's good.
Yeah, I think that's good. So you kind of gave us a little description for 5 of them,
Yep.
but then you gave us some more to choose from, and I think that's a really good list for our listeners.
Thank
And
you.
obviously, if you have, those of you listening, if you have titles that you really love, maybe to reread at Christmas or something you've read during a recent Christmas that you really love that you want us to know about, please let us know.
Oh, yes. Want to hear them all if you have any suggestions. And please keep in mind, I will not be reading all of these books that I've listed off here. So don't think I'm going to be going on like a reading Christmas binge. These
Yeah.
are all ones that are going to be on my list that I'm going to be reading over the next several years. But I just wanted to highlight and bring a lot of them to the show for you today.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure that there will be some new titles for people or ones that people have read that they really enjoyed. So if you have read any of these, again, let us know if you have and if you've really enjoyed it. And especially that Christmas murder game or whatever that one was called.
Yes, the Christmas murder game. Yeah.
Yeah, Christmas Murder Game. That
I
one.
wonder if she's written anything else.
Are you looking it up right now, or?
I am. Well, I'm looking at the book. Sorry.
Yeah. No,
No.
that's okay.
All I'm doing is looking at the book, going, but I don't see any. I don't see anything. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's the first one. So,
Yeah.
anyway, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy reading. Happy Christmas reading.
Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.